We were a team of scientists working on a revolutionary project to create a new type of corn that was resistant to pests and diseases. We believed that this new corn could help to feed the world and solve the global hunger crisis. We worked tirelessly in the lab, day and night, experimenting with different genes and crossbreeding different varieties of corn. Finally, after years of work, we created a new type of corn that seemed to meet all of our requirements. It was resistant to pests and diseases, and it produced a high yield of grain. We were ecstatic. We believed that we had made a breakthrough that could change the world. We decided to test our new corn in a field trial. We planted a large field of the new corn and waited to see how it would perform. At first, everything was going well. The corn was growing strong and healthy. We were optimistic that our new corn would be a success. But then, something strange happened. The corn started to grow at an unnatural rate. It was taller and thicker than any corn we had ever seen before. We were worried, but we didn't know what to do. We decided to continue monitoring the corn and to see how it developed. The corn continued to grow. It soon became so tall that it blocked out the sun. The field was plunged into darkness. We were terrified. We didn't know what was happening. One day, one of the scientists went into the field to check on the corn. He never came back. We searched the field for him, but he was nowhere to be found. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. We were starting to panic. We didn't know what to do. We decided to evacuate the area and to call for help. When the authorities arrived, they were shocked by what they saw. The cornfield had become a monstrosity. The corn was now so tall that it towered over the trees. The field was still plunged in darkness. We told the authorities about the missing scientist, but they couldn't find him either. The authorities decided to quarantine the area and to set up a perimeter around the cornfield. They didn't know what was happening, but they didn't want to risk anyone else getting hurt. We watched from a distance as the cornfield continued to grow and mutate. The corn stalks became thicker and more twisted. The leaves became sharper and more serrated. The cornfield was becoming a living thing. One day, the cornfield broke free from its perimeter. It started to move, slowly at first, but then faster and faster. It was as if the cornfield was alive and it was hungry. We ran for our lives, but the cornfield was faster. It caught up to us and surrounded us. We tried to fight it, but it was no use. The cornfield was too strong. The cornfield swallowed us whole. We were never seen again. But the cornfield is still out there. It is still growing and mutating. It is still hungry.
Next story.
The cornfield stood tall and imposing, its rows upon rows of stalks swaying in the breeze. I had always been a little bit afraid of it, but I had never felt anything like this before. I had been living in this small town for a few months now, and I had never had any problems. But lately I had been feeling uneasy. I had the feeling that I was being watched. One night I was walking home from work when I saw a figure moving in the cornfield. It was too dark to see clearly, but I could tell that it was tall and thin. I froze in fear. The figure stopped moving. We stared at each other for a few seconds, then the figure turned and disappeared into the cornfield. I ran home as fast as I could. I locked the door and closed the curtains. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I went to the police station and reported what I had seen, but they didn't believe me. They said that I was probably just imagining things. But I knew what I had seen. I started to avoid the cornfield as much as possible, but I couldn't help but feel like it was always there, watching me. One night, I was awakened by a noise outside. I got out of bed and went to the window. I saw the figure again, standing in the cornfield. It was closer this time. I could see that it had pale skin and sunken eyes. It was wearing a long black coat. I screamed, and the figure disappeared. I called the police again, but they still didn't believe me. I was starting to lose my mind. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't live like this anymore. I had to do something. I decided to confront the creature in the cornfield. I knew it was dangerous, but I didn't see any other choice. I armed myself with a flashlight and a knife, and I went into the cornfield. I walked through the rows of corn, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear the creature moving around in the corn, but I couldn't see it. I stopped walking and called out to the creature. Come out, wherever you are," I said. The creature didn't respond. I took a step forward. "I'm not afraid of you," I said. The creature stepped out of the cornfield. It was taller than I had thought. It had long, pale skin and sunken eyes. It was wearing a long, black coat. I screamed and backed away. The creature started to walk towards me. I raised my knife and pointed it at the creature. "Stay back," I shouted. The creature stopped walking. We stared at each other for a few seconds. Then the creature smiled. It was a cold, cruel smile. I turned and ran. I ran as fast as I could, but the creature was faster. It caught up to me and grabbed me by the arm. I screamed and struggled to break free, but the creature was too strong. The creature raised its hand and struck me across the face. I fell to the ground, dazed and confused. The creature loomed over me. I could see the madness in its eyes. I knew that I was going to die, but then something strange happened. The creature started to scream. It was a terrible, piercing scream. The creature clutched at its head and fell to the ground. I got up and ran. I ran as fast as I could until I reached the edge of the cornfield. I collapsed on the ground, exhausted and terrified. I looked back at the cornfield. The creature was gone. I don't know what saved me that night, but I'm grateful. I know that the creature is still out there somewhere in the cornfield, but I'm not going back. I'm never going back.
Next story.
It was a hot summer day, and a group of teenagers decided to play a game of hide-and-seek in a cornfield. They had heard stories about the cornfield being haunted, but they didn't believe them. The teenagers started the game with a countdown. Once the countdown was over, they scattered in all directions, each one trying to find the best hiding spot. One of the teenagers, a girl named Sarah, decided to hide in the deepest part of the cornfield. She ran and ran until she couldn't see the edge of the field anymore. Sarah found a spot behind a large cornstalk and crouched down. She held her breath and waited. After a few minutes, Sarah heard someone coming. She held her breath even tighter. The footsteps came closer and closer. Sarah could see a pair of feet approaching. The footsteps stopped right in front of Sarah's hiding spot. Sarah could feel her heart pounding in her chest. The person stood there for a moment, then turned and walked away. Sarah let out a sigh of relief. She had almost been caught. Sarah waited a few more minutes, then she decided it was safe to come out of hiding. She stood up and looked around. She was completely alone. Sarah started to walk back towards the edge of the cornfield, but as she walked, she realized that she was lost. She couldn't find her way out. Sarah started to panic. She ran and ran, but she couldn't find the edge of the cornfield. She was trapped. Sarah started to scream for help, but no one could hear her. She wandered through the cornfield for hours, but she couldn't find her way out. Finally, she collapsed on the ground, exhausted and terrified. Sarah lay on the ground, listening to the sound of the wind rustling through the cornstalks. She was starting to lose hope. Suddenly she heard a noise. It was a low, growling noise. Sarah opened her eyes and saw a pair of glowing red eyes staring at her from the shadows. Sarah screamed and tried to run, but it was too late. The creature jumped out of the shadows and attacked her. Sarah screamed and fought, but the creature was too strong. It dragged her into the darkness. Sarah was never seen again. The next day, the other teenagers returned to the cornfield to look for Sarah. They searched all day, but they couldn't find her. The police were called, but they couldn't find any evidence of what had happened to Sarah. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. The teenagers were devastated by Sarah's disappearance. They knew that something terrible had happened to her, but they didn't know what.
As a huge support, please hit like, subscribe, and maybe share your thought or any experience before going to watch another video. Thank you so much. Have a good day.